Good evening. Sorry for the slight delay. We're usually very timely commission. I blame Esmeralda, although she was here on time, but she'll take the collective blame for the commission. My name is Jim Malatras. I am the co-chair of the New York State Complete Count Census Commission. Secretary of State is Rosanna Rosado. Our great Secretary of State is the other co-chair. She could not join us tonight, but she sends her regards. Before we start, we'd like to welcome Pastor Guilford Monrose up for a brief welcome and introduction.
All right, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Make Brooklyn count?
Make Brooklyn count!
100%. All right, so whenever I say make Brooklyn count, you have to say 100%. Make Brooklyn count?
100%.
So whenever we speak tonight and anyone say make Brooklyn count, you say 100%. So we are going to make Brooklyn count.
100%.
Don't sleep on me now. So we are going to make Brooklyn count 100%. And that's our goal and that's our mantra at Borough Hall. Again, I'm Pastor Gilman Rose. I'm the Director of Faith-Based and Clergy Initiative for the Borough President, Eric Adams. And again, we're so glad to host the commission today to really share in our idea of making sure that we can do as much as we can to make Brooklyn count. Tonight, I'm also joined by the co-chair for Brooklyn, Cecilia Clark, who is also going to be speaking tonight, and she'll be sharing with us our ideas for Brooklyn. We are serious about the census. We know that it is a serious issue, and we're taking it very seriously here at Borough Hall. So again, good evening and welcome to all. And again, we are a partner with any one of you who have organizations. Please join our Complete Count Committee so that we can make Brooklyn count 100%. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We could try for 110% too. We have a pretty packed thing tonight, but I just want to say there's various representatives from the Public Advocate's Office, the Mayor's Office, the Governor's Office, and others, so thank you for attending tonight. These are really critically important meetings that we're doing because it's helping to form a final report and recommendations to the state, the governor, and the legislature as we now get into the implementation stage and start counting for the census. We don't have to dig into all of the issues that have been raised. We're going to deal with some of those tonight, but the federal government, it's a bit of an understatement, has made it more challenging for states, especially as diverse as ours, so it's incumbent upon us to do everything in our powers to make sure we have a complete count. We will have two presentations tonight. They'll go approximately 15 minutes. The commissioners get to ask the pointed questions to try to help inform the discussion. Then we have several people who have signed up for pre-registered comments. We want everybody to have a chance to speak. So there is a very nice looking gentleman right there with the glasses. He's smiling now, but upon the completion of 3 minutes of your time, he will stop smiling. So we like to keep everybody right to 3 minutes in order to give everybody a chance. If you have written testimony, you may submit it to the commission, and the commission will post all written testimony online. And that could be as long as you would like it to be, but we're going to hold our testimony tonight, public comment period, to 3 minutes for each individual so we can start. With that, I would like to call up our first presenter from the CUNY Journalism School, Jahangir Hatik.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and honorable members of the Commission. I feel honored to be speaking in front of you and putting up my testimony. My name is Jahangir Khatak, and I'm the co-director of the Center for Community and Ethnic Media at the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism. The center has been in existence since 2011 and serves the Metro New York-based community and ethnic media. For the past 6 years, the center has served as a bridge between minority and ethnic media and mainstream media outlets, as well as the public at large. Through close interaction with the community and ethnic media, headquartered in the Metro New York area, that serve readers, listeners, viewers across the nation, CCM, as we call it, has elevated the stature of diverse newsrooms, helped ethnic journalists to develop professionally, and promoted the objective of a more collaborative media environment. We organize editorial and media sustainability trainings, hold panels, roundtables, briefings, Q&As under our Newsmaker series with different public officials or on important subjects such as census, doing research on the emerging trends in this media sector, and much more. Under the leadership of our new executive director, Graciela Makovsky, who could not be here though she wanted to, but she had some other engagements, we are now expanding our reach to encompass the much larger nationwide universe of media publications, online sites, radio and television programmers, serving ethnic and immigrant communities. Metro New York region has a large media presence. We have a really large ethnic and community media. We also call it diaspora media, it's also called immigrant media, but we call it ethnic media. While we don't have the exact numbers about how many actually are there, but we estimate that there are at least 300 media houses in the Metro New York region. The CCM has developed an online directory of this media where we have 269 media houses in that directory. And the reason we don't have more because this directory is the result of an online, very extensive online survey, and people responded to it voluntarily. So not everyone responded. And these media houses are certainly serving different immigrant groups, different neighborhoods, and carrying stories at the very grassroots level. And now let me tell you one more thing, that this media, even though it's very vast, it's very large, but it's very uneven as well. We have large publications such as Chinese Daily World Journal or Spanish Daily, El Diario, and then we have medium-sized publication which I may include like News India Times, Polish language Nowy Janek, or Amsterdam News, or smaller publications like Pakistan News, Arabic language Al-Leva Al-Arabi, or Spanish language Queens Latino, or Nepalese Khaso Khas, and there are so many, the list goes on. An overwhelming majority of this media are weekly newspapers. They are very small. Many may be coming out of basements, one-room apartments or one-room offices. And they are run by a very skeleton staff where one person may be wearing all possible hats that you can think of in a newspaper's office. But they are doing very important work. The CCM, we at a CCM did a survey recently, and we found that 60% of this media that we have in this city, in the Metro New York region actually, they have a staff of between 1 and 5 people, 60%. These media houses enjoy solid readership, viewership, listenership, and really good community support. The strength of this media can be gauged from the fact that this media gets its revenue, most of its revenue, if not all, in the case of very, very small publications, from their own community businesses. Their own community businesses support and sustain this media in majority of the cases. Or neighborhood businesses also support them. Another reason for the loyal audience this media enjoys is the limited language skills that we have in many immigrant population. or enclaves, I may call them. As you know, about 40% of city's population, 37% to be more precise, is foreign born. And 1.8 million New Yorkers have little or no English language skills. Nearly half of the residents speak languages other than English in their houses, in their homes. So their primary source of information is the media in their own language. And that's why this media has a lot of power and a lot of following. And that's why many, rather now, I think we have some really great friends like Gita Mustafi and many more in the city government who have always very strongly supported this media. So we are seeing that this media is getting more and more support, and also a lot of focus and attention. And that's why city agencies and different political leaders, election candidates, this media is their natural choice. Every time and any time they want to connect with a particular neighborhood or certain communities, so they use this media, maybe for endorsements, maybe for better coverage. So this media is pretty extensively used. Use of this media for census-related outreach is also certainly not new. In 2010, when we had census, at that time, the Census Bureau had identified 12 hard-to-reach communities, from where traditionally the response rate was very low. And the New York State gave, at that time, I used to work at the New York Community Media Alliance, which was a very small media nonprofit. So NYCMA collaborated with the New York Immigration Coalition to reach out to these hard-to-reach communities. Under a grant, we published advertisements related to census, the importance of census, and why it is critical that everybody should respond to the census. We advertised in 60 communities, community publications. And not just that, we developed a sort of a PSA, but it was an editorial. And we sent that as well to all the publications which were focused on those communities, requesting them that if they want, they can use this editorial and publish it. And there were publications who did that as well. The result of all this effort was that after the census, 2010 census, New York City was included in the most improved category after the results were in, and which saw some increase in the response rate as well. At that time, both Census Bureau and city officials attributed the city's improved response rate both to the aggressive marketing campaign and to partnerships with civic associations, media, and other local groups that reached out to the people at the grassroots, explaining to them why it is important to be counted. For the 2020 census too, since we were part of this process at that time and we are part of this process again. So far, CCM has done some work, like when last year in April, when the news of inclusion of citizenship question, it came. So on April 3, 2018, we organized a panel on the impact of 2020 census if the citizenship name is there, because the news had gone viral. There were a lot of apprehensions, especially in the ethnic communities. Many were scared, many were already apprehensive, and it added to their apprehension. So and we felt that there should be something where we should bring in people who can speak. And we organized this panel. And it was hosted by New York One's Errol Lewis, who also teaches at the J School. And it was attended by Moya Commissioner Bita Mustafi at that time. She was also there very kindly. And Deputy Mayor for Strategic Policy Initiatives, Philip Thompson. And Marisa Lago, Director, Department of City Planning. And the panel basically discussed the possible impact of the citizenship question on the overall response rate, the stakes that the city has, because many people thought that, oh, I'm not going to respond. So we wanted to address that as well, and thankfully, Bita and other panelists, they addressed that, and we had a very good turnout from the media as well who covered it. And they focused on the impact and the stakes that the city had, both in terms of representation, federal funding, and also to throw some light on what city would plan down the road. After that, we continued to highlight, because this citizenship question was a news. It was a headline constantly in this media. And at that time, we had a website called voicesofny.org. We would publish stories which were coming out in different community and ethnic newspapers, bringing in different perspectives. What is the thinking going on in different communities about this? And we published those. And then in March 2019, after Mayor Bill de Blasio announced the appointment of Julie Mannon as the director of the Census for New York City, we invited her to our Newsmaker series Q&A, where she discussed her vision and strategy for the extensive outreach that the city is planning. And I'm glad that Moya will also have a bigger role in that. Later, when the Census Bureau announced schedule for accepting the RFPs through Team Y&R marketing company for census-related advertising, CCM collaborated with FYI, which is a New York-based nonprofit advertising group, to hold a training workshop on May 17th to help this media complete the RFP, because that was a bit complicated. Many people even did not understand how to complete it. So we tried to help them. And we also collaborated with FYI to develop a webinar and made available some online resources to help the media that missed our training to complete the RFP. This training and the online resources that we developed, we used some generous grant from the New York Community Trust. Then on May 29th, we partnered with the Jewish Community Relations Council to organize a half-day conference on the census, where Director Julie Mannon was the keynote speaker, while it was addressed, among others, by Lisa Moore, who is the Census Bureau's Assistant Regional Census Manager at the New York Regional Census Center. Almost 100 journalists and community organization members attended the conference, which included presentations on the city's demographics, past census response rates, and also a panel to showcase the community perspective and how they are preparing for the outreach. And Pastor Gilbin was also there, for which we are very thankful to him. And now we have recently announced a 7-week fellowship on census reporting. The idea is to train 15 journalists from this media to enable them to supplement their, of course, they are able to write stories, but we just want to, supplement their ability to produce even better content on census and produce some high impact reports. So we will be starting it in early September because we feel that since this media is so closely followed and people trust it, so if it produces more content, certainly it will have greater impact. And certainly we are also planning to hold more census-related events down the road. We have many which are still in the planning stage, so I cannot talk about that right now. But I thank again the Commission for inviting me to share what we are doing, and I'll be very happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Before I have any questions, do any of my fellow commissioners have questions? Commissioner Singh.
Yeah. Thank you so much. As you know, my office, the Center for Law and Social Justice, has been working with your prestigious office, but I am going to press you a little bit about whether it is possible to encourage the broad breadth of the ethnic media who do podcasts as well as cable TV shows to devote time to this topic now, as opposed to January 2020. We are in the process of attempting to convince New Yorkers to fill out the census, and we've been told that it takes 7 times for people to hear 7 times fill out the census for them to consider it something that they should actually do, because for some it's an act of courage. So I'll stop pontificating and just ask you if it's possible for those of us here at the Commission and those of us who are active in the census advocacy community to work with you even more closely and to encourage folks to do podcasts, do cable TV shows, obviously print stories, whatever media they use, including obviously internet and e-journalism, so that the word gets out. And we are willing to come and speak in English or whatever languages we have and work with every community in New York City.
I think that's a very, very important component of the outreach. There is a mushroom growth of IP TV, Internet Protocol TV in New York City among different communities. Many newspapers where like the printing cost is going high, so many newspapers are switching to podcasts as well. So it has become a very powerful way of storytelling that has been adopted by many. One thing that I would also point out is that every time we have organized any event, not just related to census, but any event, so our friends who are running or who are associated with any of the online or television or radio media, they are always very eager to interview our guests. Some want to invite them as well to their studios. So I wish that if there was a list of experts who are available in different areas, and those are somehow publicized, I think that will be very, very helpful, because these media houses are always looking for, I think, voices. They want to connect a bigger issue with their community, and that's a big problem for them, because you see, immigration, like to me, is a 3-tier process. You come to a country from your country of origin. Second is assimilation. You assimilate local tradition, culture, and then you integrate. So many of these communities are at different stages of integration. So their understanding of the system, their understanding of the issues may be limited. So if they are not covering, it may not be just because they don't want to. That's also possible because they don't have the resources. But also because they don't know much about it. So that's why we at the center, our Newsmaker series is part of that effort, where we request our friends in the City Hall, in the city government, to come and speak to this media, educate them, and tell them how a policy that is made in Beeta's office is impacting somebody in Jackson Heights or in Brooklyn or in any part of the city. So that disconnect is there. And we want that if this media is reporting more on local issues, it will increase civic engagement. And when civic engagement goes up, then you will see that people will have questions, people will be pushing, they will be, and that's what we needed. And we are trying that. But I really love this, your thought. And my just request is that if there is a way where, some names of experts were made available in different areas so that it's easy for them to go and There are so many radio, a lot of IPTV actually.
Commissioner Mustafi?
Hi, thank you so much for your testimony, Jahangir. I really love the idea that you guys have supported with the fellowships for journalists. I think you noted the slim kind of staff that a lot of community and ethnic media outlets have with the wide audiences that they serve. And maybe wanted to hear just a little bit more about kind of how you're thinking of structuring it. You said 7?
We will have 7 classes on like 7 consecutive Thursdays. Not one of them will be on a Wednesday because the instructor is not available. But we will be inviting different, like some journalists who have covered the census to give them story ideas as well. I don't want to say that journalists from this media don't have story ideas, but I think where they always struggle is they want to find that connection, you know, that sweet spot where they want to connect their community, and that can generate some debate. I think that is where, and that's why we are trying to bring in different experts. We will have demographers, we will have academics, we will have journalists. They will come, they will speak to this group of journalists and explain. And also, when we try to bring more than one in a class. And the reason is not just that interaction should be just limited to that class, rather the same person can become a resource for the reporter as well. Because down the road, if he or she is writing a story and they need some more comments or a better understanding of something that they don't understand, so they can go back to them. So the idea is to just create that an environment, a space where you know, there is a greater interaction on more like very specific subjects like census, because generally the understanding of census, especially in the many ethnic enclaves, I think is very, very low, very low. And that's where you will find most, like, this is not me, according to New York Times, they estimate that New York City has one of the highest concentration of hard to count community populations. And that is because of that, because I think there is a disconnect. And we are trying in very limited resources, we are trying to do that, to fill that gap, to promote more local reporting on issues which are impacting their lives directly, and then promote some discussion in their opinion columns, because that's where discussion and debate generates. And that's what we are trying to do. And all these efforts are focused on A, a very informed journalist, B, a journalist who can report in the American environment, a person who is coming from another country. They are bringing their own brand of journalism, which may not be, it may be good for or useful for the generation that he is from, but his own kids will not enjoy that journalism. So we want that anyone who is coming from another country, they should learn about, they should understand the local system. That's why we have done fellowships on education, like in America, especially in most of the ethnic households or the immigrant households, the parents learn about the education system from their own children. They don't know that. They learn much of it, much of the learning is coming from their own children. So we have done a couple of fellowships on education. We have done fellowships on health, because people don't understand the health system either. And plus the journalists are not trained enough to understand or to write a story which can be understood by a wider audience, and to connect with the issues and to raise their voice wherever it is needed.
And could you speak to the importance of providing advertising within these outlets in multilingual ad forms?
See, this is like at the heart of this whole effort. I mentioned in my presentation that most of these communities, and you know it very well that you have worked with this media for so long, that most of these publications owe their existence to their community businesses. The community businesses cannot afford to advertise in the mainstream press, so they go to their own media. And also, the community businesses, many of them, not all, but many of them, are offering some niche products for a niche market. And they have to go to their media. So they owe their existence to each other. Many of the publications don't get advertisements. I think it was your effort and many other, strong supporters in the city government who have worked really hard to bring some ad dollars. Reason, the information consumption patterns within different communities are different. For example, the South Asian community gets much of its information from Facebook or WhatsApp groups. The African community loves radio. So you will find different patterns in different communities. And if you have messaging in the shape of advertising that is in their own language, I think that will be very powerful, and that is very powerful. And I would really urge that this is what we really need. And thankfully, we are really grateful to Mayor Bill de Blasio that he has allocated $40 million for this whole outreach campaign. And we hope that some of that outreach effort dollars will be going to this media as well. Because I often tell our friends in the city government that I am not against any mainstream newspaper. I respect them, and I admire them, and I read them as well. But I tell them that if you have some very critical information about your agency that you want to be passed on to a particular neighborhood or a community, don't expect mainstream media to do that, because they are not designed to do that. But this media will do it. And so it is your very reliable partner. And it's a very good opportunity to use this media, use its strength for your strength. And I think this experiment has, at least since Mayor Bill de Blasio has taken over, I think we have seen big improvement. We have seen a surge in ad dollar going in this direction towards this media. And also I have seen personally newspapers which in the past used to have stories, all the stories from their countries of origin, and they would have nothing, what's going on. Exactly. We don't want that. I mean, I'm not against a publication, for example, which is, covering a particular immigrant group, and they are talking about the country of origin, that's fine. But if you allocate 90% of the space to that country of origin and 10% to America, so I think that integration process, this very media will become a hurdle. And if you don't prepare it, it has to be prepared so that it speeds up that process of integration and increase the civic engagement.
No questions, but just thank you for your time and your testimony. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
I do have a suggestion. Just like you have appeared today and testified before this commission has had a series of experts from different disciplines. I strongly suggest that you get back in touch with the executive director and ask for the contacts of all the people who have come to us and testified so that you can have them as part of your list of experts.
That will be very good.
They were not paid.
Thank you so much.
Let me ask you a couple of questions
Yes,
before
please.
you go. We're trying to dig a little more deeply into some of these areas in order to provide a little more granularity and concrete action items for the state. And it's come up repeatedly that you have to go to various media outlets to make sure you're reaching every community, especially hard to count communities, depending on how you define hard to count or hard to reach, but we're all in the same ballpark about where that analysis is. Commissioner Simmons mentioned it through the podcast, but do we have actual hard analysis or some way of getting it to show which sources of news resonates more with certain groups. You mentioned it a little bit. You have it in a sort of matrix, I have it in my head as a matrix. You have age groups where social media may be more prevalent in a more sophisticated way now. 2010 versus 2020, even though Twitter and all those things existed then, is a far different environment. And if the 2016 presidential election is any indication of that, it's a sophisticated operation of how you continues that. So do you have analysis about which age groups react to what kind of modalities of media, what resonates with them? And then by ethnic groups and other groups, do you have something that we can sort of include and say, this is where you need to target X dollars in this community because it resonates with 18 to 24-year-olds in this way, it resonates with et cetera, et cetera. Do you have that, or could you work with folks to get that? Because I think there's a key piece in helping us get folks to sort of invest in certain areas.
I don't have.
It's not a quiz, so you can come back and say we'll do the analysis.
But I'm just trying to explain. I don't have the hard numbers, but based on the experience, the work that we have been doing with this media, social media is really very powerful. We did a research study, I think in 2016, and if you would like, I can share that with you as well.
Yeah.
And that was on how this media is using or adapting the internet, because that also gave us an insight that how many publications have, for example, Facebook pages, how many have Twitter accounts, how many are tweeting, how frequently, and what time. So basically it is a pretty extensive research based on, I don't exactly remember how many publications, but it was quite a lot, quite a few publications that they were approached, interviewed, and they had quite a few questions. So I can share that with you. That will give you some interesting insights. In terms of appeal, I think there's a big debate going on within this media itself as well. Like, for example, last year, the executive editor of one of the largest Chinese language newspaper, who is a friend of mine, so he called and he wanted to meet, and then he came, and I said, so what's up? He said, our print circulation is going down. Our online numbers are going up. And I came here just to tell me what is our future. What future do you see? You have been working with this media for so long. And I said, I don't know, but one thing that comes to my mind is that few factors will be very important. Top being immigration. As long as you have new immigrants coming in, so Chinese language readers will be there. And then it depends on how good they are in teaching their own children. My children don't understand, barely understand their mother tongue. They just understand English. Or if they understand it, they cannot read or write. So that's the story of pretty much every immigrant. So you really have to see how many of those age groups, especially the youth, is using this media. Because to me, the number, depending on the community, the number, like the more integrated communities, for example, the Indian community. In the entire Metro New York region, we have only one Hindi language newspaper. We have quite a few Punjabi language newspapers, but most of them are in English. So it depends, on the community to community. So if there is a particular community that you are thinking of reaching out to, so then we can go into more details and see what kind of information we can get, because as long as somebody is consuming information from sources other than English, so the young immigrants may not be big-time users. I don't want to give a sweeping statement, but there is a chance. And because some communities are very actively working on educating their youth, like Korean community is doing a lot. They are doing special classes in New Jersey just to educate their children to know and to read and write their language. So it depends, but it's a big challenge, and it depends from community to community.
And the second thing, and then I'll turn it over to the
Just, can I
commissioners.
make a quick comment on that?
If you could just let me finish my question, then I'll turn
Well,
it
this
right
is
over.
actually directly related.
That's okay, let me finish and then we'll turn it over. The second piece to this is, we use it sort of as the same terminology, advertisements versus sort of just print, traditional news media, which is not an advertisement, and what resonates the best. And you also raised this fellowship question, I think Commissioner Mustafi mentioned it as well. How do you take this concept where it's a really sophisticated campaign of sorts? And we've had, and Commissioner Reardon's not here, the labor commissioner, labor organizations want to work with community organizations because that's what they do. They run campaigns, they advertise, they saturate the markets, they know how to frame messages. How do we connect? And maybe that gets back to Commissioner Simmons' point, we have to connect all of you. How do we do this on scale, right? 7 internships are great, but this is every part of the state. We have 19 million people. Buffalo to Montauk's a long way away from each other, but a lot of similarities in those communities exist. There's probably more similarities in Brentwood and Long Island and Suffolk County than if you go up to Chautauqua County sometimes as well. So how do you do that? And do we have analysis of sort of what resonates the best? What sort of advertising? Is it advertising at print media? Is it a combination of both? Have we seen any of this through the citizenship question? Because I think still there's a lot, as you mentioned in your testimony, confusion and fear about if the citizenship question still exists on the census or not, even though it's been disposed of that we think.
So 2 things. We have an internal debate in our own office where one of my colleagues always tells me that print media is over.
It's dead.
And
is dead.
I always and I always tell her that I agree, but partly. Because the world of community and ethnic journalism, it's a bit different. Newspapers which come once a week, they come once a week with a shelf life. So a newspaper which is in a barber's shop or in a restaurant, so that information that you have in that newspaper is being consumed by so many people. And then you have online media. You have advertisements both in online and print. We have one newspaper here in Brooklyn she's a good friend of mine, she has experimented so much, but she cannot, or she could not make it because the online ad rates were so low that it makes you unsustainable. Ultimately, she started a print as well because print was giving her more revenue. In terms of messaging, the online publications always combine their push for any messaging in multiple ways. Not just that they have it, they have their message or advertisement or whatever they are pushing or promoting in a very prominent place, but also they are very active on social media. So they combine the two together. And in fact, in some communities, some people have they're trying to make some revenue stream out of it as well, because they give some incentive to someone if they advertise, so they promise them that, we'll do this on promotion on Facebook or on Twitter. I, being a bit old school, I think still for messaging, both are important because communities across the city are, embracing the new technology. But print should not be excluded at all because it remains a very, very, like a friend of mine who who still runs a Filipino publication. She used to have an online publication. And every time, like she experimented even once she went to her readers asking them to raise $5,000. Why? Because she wanted to do some investigative reporting. And she did raise, and she did some investigative reporting. But those efforts were not sustainable. And finally, she also started print. Why? Because it has, I think, in these communities where the audience is looking for not just news, I think, they are looking for some good deals as well, like, different ticketing agencies offering different deals, which otherwise you will have to search a lot. The easiest thing is you pick a community newspaper and you have it. All the important services that any community member needs, it's there, so they can pick it.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Beveridge?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that if you were going to analyze, say, New York City's ethnic communities, you use the American Community Survey and you use like the raw data or the what's called the public use microsample from the American Community Survey, you could actually figure out who has internet, who speaks what language at home, how well do they speak and read English. I mean, all those data actually, interestingly enough, and that's all I wanted to say, are collected by the Census Bureau, and I think it would be very useful for any kind of plans, in a very diverse community like New York, to try to figure out like what age do people use internet? They even do you have access to internet and how? So I think that, so a study done, like a study on, probably in New York generally on that basis might be helpful.
I think we need that for the commission, quite frankly, because you know who has the internet. My question is, what vehicle do people get access and you get their sources of news? Twitter, WhatsApp. We can't saturate with $40 million or $60 million or $80 million, but what are the best ways of targeting those specific communities on data, I think would be a good thing for the commission to have, which we don't. So we'll work with you. We would like to work with you and make sure we can include it.
Absolutely. It will be on our...
The executive director to close.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you. The work you're doing is phenomenally interesting, and thank you for it. And I suspect over time people will come to see how valuable it is. A couple quick questions. I think you said there are approximately 269, 270 media of one form or another that are in your directory. Is that directory available to us now, and is there anything confidential about it that would prevent us from using it or publishing it?
No, it's online. It's available online. We had a print version as well because we did the survey in 2013. And we have been trying to update it, but we have not made a complete update of the entire directory. Much of the information is still good. There is a chance that one editor might have moved on because this media is small and people move from one place to another. So that chance is always there. Right. You can access it online. It's available for $50, but it can be purchased online. You will get a password and you can just log into it and you have access to all the 269. There are different filters that you can use to separate them by language, by community, by different geographic regions. So there are different filters.
And you mentioned that you're working on something for the outside the New York metro area. What is the status of that?
This is the reason we are doing it. That's why we are expanding it, and due to this big move that our Dean Sarah Bartlett initiated, we had to cut down some programs in order to focus on other areas because the experiment that we did in New York City, we feel that it is needed in many, many other cities because we have so much media out there in other cities as well. And those people are in need as well. Just to give you one example, we did one training on advertising, we have done a few. So one German sent me an email he said that I will be traveling, I am leaving now, so I will see you in the morning. And I will leave like late in the night. So I asked him, where are you coming from? He said, I'm coming from Rochester, just to attend that training. So there is such a big need. There is a big need because this media all over is facing different challenges. Sustainability is at the heart of it. And that's what we are trying to do. And that's why we are going to some bigger centers first, where we will replicate some of the programs that we are doing here that we feel the media there can take full advantage of and can really improve, and expand their work.
Okay, and then just one more comment. You mentioned that there are you're proposing 7 classes for editors, publishers, writers, journalists. I'd like to suggest that you consider having people from the government, the city and the state, and then also from the Census Bureau. Lisa Moore's in the center of the room. She's going to raise her hand now. She's from the Census Bureau. That we've held a number of these sessions across the state, and the ability to provide reliable information at the start of one of the sessions may be helpful to you and to those you're working with. And I'm sure we'd all be willing to participate.
Absolutely, that will be certainly a priority. I think in one of the classes, because my colleague Karen Painter, she designed the whole fellowship, and we have, I think, one class, so I will check, and then I'll certainly get back.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Next, Chris Waddle, Associate State Director from the AARP. Good evening.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, Chair Malatras and members of the Commission. As you mentioned, my name is Chris Waddle. I'm the Associate State Director for AARP here in New York. And on behalf of AARP, we have in our 38 million members nationwide and 2.7 million here in New York. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak today about the importance of the 2020 census on the older population here in New York. A complete and accurate count of residents in New York and the next decennial enumeration will help ensure that our state obtains representation we deserve in our nation's democracy and the resources we need to meet the vital needs of communities that are aging across the state and here in the city. So in April 2010, there were 40.3 million people that were aged 65 and older. And AARP's membership is 50 and older, but we're looking just at the 65 population here. And so there were 40.3 million people of that age. And that was an increase of 5.3 million since the 2000 census. The number of people 65 and older in the United States is expected to increase to 55 million in 2020, to some 70 million by 2030, and 88.5 million, or 20% of the population, in 2050. So put yet another way, between 2006 and 2030, the U.S.'s population of adults aged 65 and older will nearly double from 37 million to 71.5 million people. Statewide, the 65-plus population has grown 24%. That's 12 times the rate of those under 65. This is according to a new report published by the Center for an Urban Future that was underwritten by AARP earlier this year. The study reveals that the number of older adults here in New York City alone, residents aged 65 and older, increased 12 times faster than the city's under 65 population over the past decade. And there are now a record 1.24 million adults aged 65 plus living in the 5 boroughs. Older New Yorkers will soon account for 20% of New York City's overall population in just a few years. And it's also worth noting that of the 65 population, over 50% are immigrant seniors. AARP is the nation's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to empowering people 50 and older to choose how they live as they age. AARP strengthens communities and advocates for what matters most to families: health, security, financial stability, and personal fulfillment. As in the past, AARP is a national partner of the Census Bureau. We will be leveraging our resources, local partnerships, our volunteers, communications channels, both nationally and locally, to convey the importance and the impact of census participation. So for the first time in our 230-year history, there will be options to take the census in new ways in 2020. In addition to paper, people can take the census by phone or online. For many, and not just the 50+, the term online brings angst and worry. AARP will be communicating with our members and the general public to let them know several important facts. First and foremost, while 95% of people will be invited by an initial postcard mailing and follow-up letter from the Census Bureau to participate in the census online, if they take no action, they will then receive a paper copy of the census in the mail and can participate by mail or by phone if that is their preferred method of doing so. Secondly, AARP is committed to fighting census fraud and scams and anticipates that there will be bad actors both online and in person in 2020. We will leverage our communications channels, including email, podcasts, telephone town halls, publications, press releases, newspaper articles, and in-person presentations to inform our members and the public what the real census, what is the real census, and what the census workers look like and what the website should look like if they access it. Additionally, our Fraud Watch hotline will remain in real-time communication with the Census Bureau to tamp down on misinformation and stay ahead of news scams. Thanks to technology, people will be able to go online and check and see if census workers are scheduled to be in their area that day. In addition, census workers will be carrying a watermark badge with an expiration date and will never ask people for the social security number, bank account information, or financial contributions. Confidentiality of the census is a key concern for our membership. The Census Law, Title 13 of the U.S. Code, requires that responses to the Census Bureau surveys and censuses be kept confidential and used for statistical purposes only. All staff working with confidential information at the Census Bureau take a lifetime oath to protect the privacy and confidentiality of respondent information. Unlawful disclosure is a federal crime, punishable by $250,000 fine or 5 years in prison or both. The Census Bureau cannot share information with the FBI, ICE, or with local police. It is prohibited by Title 13. The data collected can only be used for statistical purposes and cannot be shared for non-statistical purposes, including law enforcement. The Census Bureau has ensured that they are utilizing the strongest security protections to keep online responses safe. Data be encrypted twice. Once occurs when you hit the button to submit, and again when the responses reach the Census Bureau's database. Its goal is that communicating these facts in a clear and concise way will increase census participation. There's also a great opportunity here. The decennial census is the largest mobilization operation conducted in the United States and will require the hiring of 400,000 temporary employees for full and part-time work. Historically, retired adults have made up a good portion of those who work in the decennial counts of Americans. We have begun and will continue to inform our volunteers and the public about these jobs through online advertising, virtual job fairs, teletown halls, our website, and our publications. So demographers predict that New York could lose at least one seat in the House after 2020. The state could suffer more serious loss because of the numerous factors which are creating challenges to obtaining a full count of New Yorkers. These include a population with significant concentrations of hard-to-count residents and reduced funding for the Census Bureau during the years leading up to FY 2019, which has forced the cancellation or delay of outreach to schools and teachers, dissemination of multilingual advertising, and other effective partnerships and communication efforts. Being counted means the difference in tens of thousands of dollars for local communities each year. If someone gets missed in the 2020 count, the results are that they are missed for a decade of funding. New York is already persistently undercounted, with nearly 149,000 net individuals missed in the 2010 census. An AARP survey of adults shows that 3 out of 4 adults aged 50 and older want to stay in their homes and communities as they age. Filling out the census could increase the likelihood of that happening. Census data will be used for a decade to determine where to place parks, hospitals, roads, and businesses that the 50-plus population cares about. It will fund livable community projects that benefit people of all ages, including complete streets initiatives and mass transit options, which could help people remain in their homes longer. Census dollars are healthcare dollars. Filling out the 2020 census will determine New York's yearly portion of $300 billion of medical assistance funding, $71 billion of SNAP funding, and $70 billion of Medicare Part B physicians' fee schedule services. Since 2010, the state of New York has been receiving about $73 billion in federal funds per year based on census-derived data. In other words, getting the word out about participation in the 2020 census is really important, and it impacts nearly all aspects of New Yorkers' lives for the next decade. So we are very committed to working on this issue. We want to do whatever we can to spread the word about the importance of getting out to older populations. We are working, we have already had preliminary conversations on how we will be mobilizing our volunteers to do some of that work with other agencies that are involved in the census, so we can, so we can make sure that we are getting our fair share and that we continue to have the representation we need. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Waddle. Thank you. Before I turn it over to questions, I just wanted to recognize Assembly Member Latrice Walker, who is here joining us tonight. You're a great Assembly member. She didn't want to fuss, but we're going to give her a fuss anyway because she's doing a great job. Anyway, I'd like to open up the commission members' questions.
Did you say AARP membership starts at 50?
Yep.
I didn't know I was that
Yes.
close to eligibility, so I'm,
We all get there someday, but yes, it's 50 and older. Yes.
He's just getting there faster than some other of us.
Right.
Any other questions? We did a lot of the research that we've gotten in, and you mentioned it in your testimony, have found that older residents, New Yorkers, or people across the country usually are fairly represented. I don't want to say overcounted, but there's been some suggestions of overcounting. Well, historically, other communities, especially communities of colors, have been undercounted.
Yep.
So older adults have been left out of many of the hard-to-count analysis. In my previous hat, when I was at the Rockefeller Institute, we did a matrix, an index, and we included those older New Yorkers, 65 or older, into the analysis of being a potentially hard-to-count community, largely because you mentioned it, the move to the online portal, which isn't natural for many older New Yorkers. There's a fear, you mentioned the privacy fear, and Commissioner Beveridge, of course, has said this pretty passionately at many of our public hearings, that we give up more data, every time you go on Facebook than probably what the census is going to take from you.
Right.
Be that as it may, we do think that could be a potential risk where we could see significant fall-offs or drop-offs in many of our communities. How are you approaching that, or how can we be helpful working with your organization with its, you're mobilized all across the country, so you're everywhere. How can we help ensure that we make sure that those older New Yorkers or older Americans that have been historically taken care of, that may be at risk this year, are actually filling out and completing the census forms?
Right, so I think therein lies the problem. And that's where we see our role, because if we are moving to an online, really, the priority is online. Listen, I see our volunteers, and in the last 10 years, I would say 10 years ago, very few of them carried a cell phone. And now everybody seems to have a smartphone. So as the population ages, technology is moving with them. Many of the volunteers I have now worked all their lives with a computer, which is good. But there are still groups of older residents that are not as savvy when it comes to using a computer. And we feel it's to make sure we are letting them know that you are going to be asked to do this online, and how can we be helpful, and what is it that we can do to ease your fears and assure you that you have the protections in place to safeguard your information. And you're not going to be asked for your social security card, and you're not going to be asked for any sensitive information that could harm your finances. We would love to talk about ways that we can be helpful across the state. We're starting to have this conversation at the city level, but we want to have this conversation statewide as to what is it that we can do to make sure that we don't see a slide in the number of older adults that are counted, because they have been more of the reliable respondents. And we see that with voting numbers and things like that, so that civic engagement or that duty is very strong with it. We don't want that to miss out simply because it is first online. And yeah, so I would love to continue those conversations for sure.
Commissioner Beveridge.
Yes, please.
Following up on that a little bit, New York City, and I think what you're saying about New York City, a lot of people don't realize that it's a place that a lot of people actually kind of retire to. You know, there's kind of this notion everybody leaves New York, goes to Florida, not the city so much, because it's actually not a bad place to be when you're old. There's transportation, there's health care, that, you know, public transportation is fairly easy to get along. And one of the groups that's been growing really rapidly in the city is so-called oldest old.
Yes.
The ones over like 85,
80+, yeah.
generally 75 or 85. What are you looking at those in a special way to target? Because it seems to me that in terms of hard to count, they might actually have, particularly if they're frail, if they're infirm in one way or another, that they would be particularly difficult to get counted.
Well, unfortunately for ARP, we have a number of channels. Yes, we have online or media channels that we rely on, but we also have a number of publications. And you know, if you're approaching the age of 50, you'll know that there's a lot of hard mail that might come to your residence. If you're a member or a prospective member, you may start to see some of this yourself, since you asked. But yeah, and so we want to leverage all of our channels to make sure that we are finding those hard to reach areas where you might have more frail elderly or folks that are not going to be exposed to the opportunities to do this online, and figure out how we can connect them. And that's very important. And because of the reason that I did mention, that we want our communities to be livable. And to do that, we need to make sure everybody's counted, so we get the funding to do that, because it is vitally important.
Mr. Simmons?
Can you just be a little more specific about the way your terrific volunteers are going to become census ambassadors?
Yeah.
What specifically are you going to be asking them to do?
So, you know, we have started preliminary conversations, but what I can say is that we want to train them. We have a large cadre of volunteers here in New York that are engaged in civic things, and so we said, you know, one of the things we do is train them to go out and be ambassadors, whether it's public events. So one of the things I can definitely speak about is we have a speakers bureau. And there are trained volunteers that can go out to community groups, friendship clubs, senior centers, retiree groups, union retiree groups, and spread the word about what is coming up. And we want to start this now. We are starting the training process August, September, hopefully last one October, to start ahead of the rush, because it is going to be a very confusing time come 2020. You're going to have political advertisements going on. You're going to have the census promotions going on. So we want to start this as soon as possible, get people conditioned that they need to look out for something next year, and when they do, we have resources to help them do it. Yeah. Thank you.
Everybody good?
And so just to clarify, I don't want to make assumptions, but is it that the technology is the primary barrier, but otherwise this group are more connected to societal institutions and some of the other groups, ethnic groups and other demographics?
Well, it can be a barrier. Not for all, but I think, you know, for some of our older members, some of our older residents that are not online, maybe don't have access to a computer, have to, you know, how will they easily do this? And I think for some, I would say some of our younger members, and I would say, you know, maybe the 50 to 65, 70, I see, you know, anecdotally a more familiarity with technology and smartphones, and we know we can do this on a smartphone or we can do this on a tablet, and many have computers, but there are still groups that we interact with regularly that just don't want to communicate that way for whatever reason.
Okay.
You know, they just might be conditioned that way. It just may not be something they're comfortable with. Maybe they don't have access to it. And so we need to make sure that we are not missing them. And so we will, you know, use our other channels to try to do that. We'll certainly be doing that heavily with our members, but as a national organization that represents all 50 plus, we look at this as beyond just our membership. This is a really important time for us.
You mentioned it, and not,
No.
you mentioned that we don't have to do it here, but we think there's various levels, and I think Commissioner Beveridge mentioned it too. Being 50 and being 85 may be a different set of circumstances. We don't have a lot of that data, but it would be good to work with
Yes.
your organization, at least to know how to potentially pinpoint some of those concentrated areas, because I think there might be different ways of reaching them. So we'll work as a commission with
Yeah,
the organization.
that sounds good. So I mentioned the city Center for Urban Futures. The report that we commissioned did actually look at aging, 65 and older, but also looking at the 80-plus population. And we have this for the state, and we have this for New York City, the 5 boroughs. You can see how the increase has taken place, how the city and the state has aged, and you can see where the highest concentration by county are of people of certain age demographics. So yeah, we should certainly follow up on that conversation.
That would be great.
Great.
One more question to
Yeah,
close.
I'm a member, but
Thank you.
do we publicize in any other language besides English?
Yes, we do. So, AARP has made a much more concerted effort over the last decade to make sure that we are communicating in the languages that people prefer. So, I think almost all of our materials are now translated or transcreated in Spanish. We also do them in different Asian dialects. I know we have some in Chinese and Korean, and then others. So it will be more than just English.
Thank you very much for your testimony. It was great. Thank you
Thank you very much.
Okay, we're now going to begin our public comment period. I'll call folks up. If I say your name incorrectly, which I could do, please just for the record say it correctly so we have it right. Again, this gentleman, this gentleman here is going to be keeping time. We don't have a timer tonight, but you'll tell by his facial expression when you're running out of time. He'll go from a smile
Pick up a red
to a
pen.
frown, and then he's going to raise that red folder. If you don't stop speaking, he'll come over and smack the poor director on the head. So after 3 minutes, please, for the director's safety, please stop speaking. I want to just first start with Deputy Public Advocate Rose, and then I want to we have a couple of other elected officials that I'd like to turn over, but I'll start with Deputy Public Advocate Rose. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. I'm actually reading testimony on behalf of the public advocate for the New York City, who is Jamani D. Williams. His name is Jamani Williams, and tonight he has the pleasure of serving as a newly elected public advocate for the City of New York. Before we get into the remarks, he just wanted to applaud the efforts of the New York State Complete Count Commission in receiving the public's opinion on ways to ensure a full and complete count for the 2020 census. As the public advocate for the City of New York, he serves as the direct link between New Yorkers and their government. The Office of the Public Advocate serves as a watchdog to ensure that city agencies are as efficient and effective as demanded by the people of New York. It's important to note that this hearing is being held at Brooklyn Borough Hall today, as Brooklyn marks the hardest to count county in all of New York State. In the 2010 census, 33% of Brooklyn households did not mail back their census forms, resulting in the lowest mail return rate in the U.S. among counties with populations over 500,000 people. Ensuring a full and complete count has been a priority for the Office of the Public Advocate. Since he took office in March, we have continuously engaged with advocates who aim to ensure vulnerable communities are counted. Given this current federal administration, many of our previously undercounted communities in New York City have expressed an inherent fear of responding to the census, and many of our efforts have been to mitigate said fear. Further, underrepresented constituents have expressed their uncertainty on the overall importance of this upcoming census. While New York State has challenged and successfully eliminated the citizenship question, the fear instilled in our immigrant community has already had a profound impact. New York advocates have dedicated their time in emphasizing the importance of the census to vulnerable communities in specific spots in New York. The state of New York provided $20 million into funding for the census, but there is a lack of transparency on how that money is spent. I strongly believe that the state of New York should focus on allocating the funding towards community-based organizations that have spent years advocating for and providing services to those vulnerable populations in concentrated immigrant communities. Each undercounted population often goes unnoticed due to a lack of resources. By putting resources in the hands of those communities and community members and local activists, we'll be able to stress the urgency and importance of the census directly through word of mouth and door knocking, and a hyper-local approach will yield a fuller and more complete count, as community organizations best know their constituents and can destigmatize the fear around the census. As the upcoming census will have a digital component for the first time in history, we must ensure that we have prepared all New Yorkers for the pitfalls that may arise in neighborhoods like Chinatown, Hunts Point, Kensington, and Jamaica. Up to 50% of homes do not have internet access. Citywide, about 30% of the Black and Hispanic New Yorkers lack broadband compared to 20% among other racial and ethnic groups, and this creates an inherent disparity. The rest of my testimony is included. You have it on file, and I also have copies for anyone who may want copies of
Your
it.
first name?
Jamela Rose.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your indulgence on meeting the time. We'll put all of your testimony online.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to call Assemblyman Robert Carroll. I will not like to call Assemblyman Robert Carroll. I'll wait. Council Member Chaim Deitch. Good evening, sir. We have the official clock now, so. There you go.
My wife tells me to stop talking. So it's really great to be here. This room is actually underreported, having 8.6 million New Yorkers. This room should have been packed. But anyway, I just want to mention how important it is that every person is counted. I represent the largest Russian district out of Russia, and I speak maybe 2 words of Russian. And so you cannot rely on me to go around during the census in my district, but we rely on organizations and non-for-profits to go around and doing their work. And so I really want to give a shout out to some individuals that are here today and just really thank them. My district is not only the largest Russian American district, we also have a high population of Muslims, Pakistanis in my district, and as well as Asian, Chinese. So having non-for-profit groups going around, and this should not be, and not being a language barrier is extremely, extremely important. So when we have people like Mo Rasby, who's here today and who does a tremendous job in the Muslim community, and as well as my good friend David Pollock, who actually came on my radio show just a few months ago actually, speaking about how the African American and Jewish community are underreported and how we need to work together as one to make sure that we all have the resources that we deserve here in the city of New York, and this way working through partnerships with all the groups and the groups that, such as the groups that are here today, really represents the diversity and the make of what New York City is about, just looking around this room. And this is how we will get it done, by working together and making sure that we get the funding that we deserve, the federal funding that we deserve here in New York City. So I just came in today, and I'm going to give you a minute extra time because I'm going to cut myself short. But I just want to thank each and every one of you for being here today and making the time to come out, because I know you all have families at home. Children have no homework, so I'm not going to mention that. But you need, family time is extremely important, and you are all here today. So I want to thank the Governor's Office for being here and listening to the non-for-profits and residents of our city. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can you please tell us your district neighborhoods?
It's a challenge. So I'm not sure yet. No, I'm kidding. I represent parts of Midwood, Sheepshead Bay, Manhattan Beach, Brighton Beach, Luna Park, Trump Village, and Brightwater Towers. I have one of the largest districts. I have approximately 170,000 people in my district. My district is like 5 communities because you have the Midwood Park, they have their needs, Sheepshead Bay has their needs, Manhattan Beach, it's not my fault. Manhattan Beach, Brighton Beach, and Coney Island. So we have people representing really diverse district. I know all elected officials say the same thing. I have the most diverse district, right? They all say it. But I'm sorry? Not you, okay. Oh, good to see you. But, it's so important how we all work together and making sure that we get the resources. So thank you for that question. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, David Alexander. David Alexander? It was something Rich said. Okay. Aisha Doyle. Good evening.
Good evening to everyone, commission members. My name is Aisha Doyle, and I'm a resident of Bedford-Stuyvesant. I work at the Center for Law and Social Justice at Medgar Evers College, CUNY, as a project coordinator. I must share with you that as a resident, homeowner, and parent, I am gravely concerned about the lack of advertising and messaging in public spaces concerning the census. And when I say public spaces, I'm talking about bus stop shelters, train stations, garbage cans, libraries. An even greater source of concern is the slow movement by New York State in distributing funds to community-based organizations that serve Black communities, which are historically one of the most undercounted populations. While I have been engaged in promoting census awareness and participation through my work at the Center for Law and Social Justice, it has become painfully evident that though there are community-based organizations willing to help spread the message, they lack the basic funding to do so. Funding is imperative to increase response rates to census in Kings County. Brooklyn can ill afford potential loss of resources in the form of health services, education services, and transportation, or loss of political power that will occur if swift and decisive steps are not taken to accelerate the distribution of funds for Census 2020 awareness and education campaigns in my community. Daily, as I walk through my community and speak with my neighbors and friends, they are in awe and at times in shock about major information that is not being shared widely, if at all. For example, many people I have spoken to do not even realize that Census 2020 will be digital, primarily. Other residents ask if information is available in their native languages, like Bengali, Haitian Creole, and Spanish. The pace at which the Commission and other city government agencies are moving is untenable. It will further disenfranchise Black communities in Kings County for decades to come. I thank the Commission co-chairs and members for the opportunity to provide my testimony on this important issue.
Thank you. Next, Cecilia Clark. Good evening.
For the record, I'm Cecilia Clark. I'm president and CEO of Brooklyn Community Foundation, pleased to be a partner with Borough Hall in establishing the Complete Count Committee. We are working to make Brooklyn count.
100%.
Thank you. All the cheer aside, the situation is dire.
Thank you.
Brooklyn is the hardest to count county in all of New York State, with over 80% of Brooklynites living in hard to count neighborhoods. According to a recent study by SUNY's Rockefeller Institute, of the 500, what?
That was me.
Thank you for citing it. I just feel better about someone citing one of my reports.
Of the 500 most at-risk census tracts in the state, Kings County is home to nearly half, 243 to be exact. We are here today to hold the state accountable for the potential suppression of the count of our most vulnerable communities. The fact is, the state is running out of time, it's lacking transparency, and it has lost trust. And because of this, Brooklyn will see the further marginalization of African American communities, immigrants, and other vulnerable populations such as children and elders who rely on the count for critical resources. But there is a solution. A recent Quinnipiac poll showed that community-based organizations is the #1 best source of getting the count out over advertising, news, public announcements. It is community-based organizations. And we respectfully request the immediate release of funds to these trusted community-based organizations who can reach these hard-to-count populations quickly and effectively. And if you cannot figure out how to get the money out, we at the foundation can get it out for you. State officials have rebuffed the solution of giving money directly to CBOs, citing concerns about return on investment in federal dollars. But is it really just about money? Isn't this about fairness? Isn't this about democracy? California is spending over $100 million to ensure complete census, and clearly there are no fears about return on investment. The clock is ticking, and the reality is the state no longer has enough time to build the needed relationships and trust with these communities. But that trust already lies in the hands of local organizations that have worked with vulnerable populations for decades. The greatest return on investment will come from releasing funds to local organizations and allowing these established, credible, trusted messengers to conduct census organizing and outreach. As president and CEO of Brooklyn's only public foundation, I know firsthand that Brooklyn CBOs are the local experts needed to reach undercounted populations. They know their constituencies best, they are proven investors in these communities, and they can ensure a complete count. Please release the funds and let's get them distributed to Brooklyn's most vulnerable communities. And if you don't know how, we're here to help. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for citing my report. Your wife, 3 people have read it now, so thank you. My wife hasn't even read it yet. So. And Commissioner Simmons, so we have 4.
So where can we find your report?
It's on, we'll send the website.
I don't even believe it's been circulated to us.
There you go, it's widely distributed. Next up, Sherry Thanazi. Sherry? Okay. David Pollock. Good evening.
Thank you. My name is David Pollock. I'm the Associate Executive Director of the Jewish Community Relations Council and the Director of Public Policy and Jewish Security there. I'm very well aware of the census, although I might not come up to some of the other commissioners here. I just counted and I'm involved in the outreach. This is my 5th census. So,
oh my God.
Yeah. Well, I beat John. He's only 4.
You started when you were 9, right?
John and I went through this, and he's only at 4.
I'm at 4.
So
I'm at 4.
we also at the JCRC were very committed to a complete count. We organized an amicus brief to the Supreme Court on the citizenship question. We brought along 13 partners, Catholic, Protestant, Muslim. Mo Razvi is here, who was one of our partners from COPO, and Jewish. And one of the argument that we made, of course, was it would lead to an undercount, and we were very concerned that we knew that the needs in New York are going to increase, and if there's an undercount, there won't be the funding to meet those needs. And I just wanted to reply to one of your questions about ideas for the seniors. One of our partners, Jewish Association for Services for the Aged, wrote in our brief that they deliver 976,000 meals to homebound elderly every year. So we saw that. We've gone to Julie Menon and said, hey, can we get tablets and give them to the drivers, and as they go, they're trusted visitors to these homebound elderly. As they go in, can they say, can you do the census? Can you complete it with me? I'll do it with you. We have to figure out the confidentiality issues and all of that, but it's an idea. It's a method to do outreach on a very intensive basis to a very hard-to-reach population. One of the things that given my experience, I know that a lot of resources have gone in the past to other communities that were perceived as hard to reach. And a lot of the efforts were very, very effective. In fact, the best response rate in the 2010 census was in Washington Heights, in the middle of the Dominican community. Right. And so if you really work at it, you can do something. And we were never able to get resources. We had to try to mobilize everything within the Jewish community. And the trouble is that what we do, and when we look at all of the data, and last week the Census Bureau released a new tool at census.gov/ROAM, R-O-A-M, and they now, excuse me, hard to count is out. There is a low response score.
Low response rate, yeah.
And it reflects a percentage of households predicted not to self-respond to the decennial census. The higher the low response score, the harder the area is to reach. Now, I looked at their mapping, and well, the areas of Williamsburg, Crown Heights, Flatbush, Midwood, Borough Park, Far Rockaway, and other areas. And I also looked at, because there's New York State, I looked at Muncie. Same thing, same problem.
The man with
they're
the
all
red,
hard to reach.
the man with the red folder is holding it up. We will add all of your testimony online, and if you want to add to it, we would be happy to add to it as well.
Right, I've been skipping, so.
But the man with the red it's there.
Yeah.
So I want to give everybody equal time, so thank you very much for participating.
Okay.
We're going to call the next person.
There are a couple of very important points to make.
Yes, but I want to give equal time. I want
to reinforce the community-based organization issue. We have community-based organizations that know how to reach their population.
Great. Mr. Pollock, we're going to now we want to give everybody an equal and fair chance to speak, so we're going to now turn it to the next person.
I've been here for an hour, almost 2 hours, so.
I understand, and unfortunately, we have other people we want to speak as well. We are happy to take as much and add as much testimony to our online and post everything publicly, but we want everybody who's been waiting here a long time to also have an opportunity to speak, because it's not fair to them to have to wait for continued time while you get more time. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you. Next, Manzoor Hussain. Janelle Ferris. Florta Velasquez. I got a note. Assembly Member Walker would like to speak.
Good.
Good evening.
Good evening. Wow, this is the first time. You haven't heard me say anything yet.
That's right.
So good evening, and thank you so much to the members of the committee for being here. We've heard how critically and vitally important it is in order for us to ensure that Brooklyn is counted and then counted accurately. Most of the 243 hard-to-count census tracts are located within my district, which includes the neighborhoods of Brownsville, East New York, East Flatbush, Bed-Stuy, Ocean Hill, Cypress Hills, and I'm sure I'm missing something. I think I hit it all. Crown Heights, if I haven't said that. And to that note, one of the things that I want to stress is that I have heard a lot about community-based organizations, but not as much about the Black church. One of the things that we've learned is that the Soul to the Poll Sunday was one of the most impactful Sundays of the election in 2007, 8. And during that particular time, I wanted to just make a suggestion that Easter Sunday is April 12th, 2020. If we can have a massive campaign, whether it's radio, TV, and or print media, as well as many social media components, and on Easter Sunday, to have actual census takers out and about and actually counting individuals at that particular time and date, I think it would make a huge impact. There are a number of clergy groups, the New York Missionary Baptist Association, the African American clergy and elected officials, which I am sure, if necessary, we can provide contact information for. Having an adequate count not only ensures equal access to vital resources, but it also provides us access to equal representation. Brooklyn has seen a large number of gentrification, but not just gentrification, also tenant harassment. And as we've seen in the case in my community, 20 individuals were shot. So of course, gun violence in our neighborhoods, as well as mass incarceration, not just on the state level, but also on the federal level, has affected the number of people who are able to be counted in our community. So thank you for the opportunity to just express a couple of points. I hope that you share my urgency in recognizing the importance of Easter Sunday 2020. I do want to submit my comments also with respect to the public advocate on the broadband issues. It's been an issue for elections. It will be an issue for this as well. And I thank you, and I look forward to working with you over the course of the next couple of months.
Thank you.
There is
one question from Commissioner Simmons.
I'm so happy you're here. Because, no.
She told me everything I know.
You may be able to answer the question that has been put to me.
Yes.
In the census hard to reach, low response tracts in central Brooklyn, there is a stark outlier. In other words, almost full count. Brownsville Public Housing is that fantastic return in the middle of central Brooklyn. If you have any idea, besides their fantastic tenant association, of how they managed to do that, I would appreciate knowing. Talking to them, just finding out what they did. They actually outpaced the Dominicans in Washington Heights.
Well, one of the things that I remember during that time, I was working for Congresswoman Yvette Clark, and we had a community-based complete count committee, which I know we've been attending the borough presidents, but we will be. There is our chairperson of Community Board 16 is here, as well as the chairperson of our Social Action Committee for Community Board 16. So we are on the ground and we are ready. And one of the things that was done also was that NYCHA sent out a mass mailing to all of the residents of the NYCHA developments, which really just sort of helped to reinforce why it was important. So people were really receiving a lot of information. We did a mailer from our office in order to make sure that people were counted, and we will do one from our assembly office. We are fortunate also to have Councilwoman Alika Ampry Samuel, Congresswoman Yvette Clark, and myself, who really put forth a huge effort in terms of, compounding our resources in order to make sure that the community will be counted. So that's something that we're going to be working on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Assemblymember.
And we'll be following the money as well. I heard a lot about the transparency and accountability. And, but it has been a pleasure to work with all of you up until this point. And I'm glad that we will enjoy the same level of vigor in the months to come. So thank you and keep up the great work.
Thank you very much. Next up, Atula Hanley. Mohammed Razvi. Say it for the record, just in case I got it. Okay.
So for the record, my name is Mohammed Razvi. I am the CEO of COPO, Council of People's Organization, and the president of Muslim Census Committee 2020. So we have over about 25 organizations already working with us. And also we are working with the Interfaith Census Count Committee with UJA, Catholic Charities, FPWA. And it is one of those moments where we realized that Census didn't have a plan to work with the faith-based groups. It was something that we came together and we said, we got to tackle this right now. So at the moment, as Cecilia, the president of Brooklyn Community Foundation, mentioned, Brooklyn was one of the hardest responses. I'm in that community board 14 where we really, really are the lowest. So I am emphasizing tremendously to figure out how to work with community-based organizations. And we were fortunate in 2010 we did this, but the state only gave us $7,000. We did what we could with $7,000. Currently, there's over 1 million Muslims throughout the 5 boroughs. And we are afraid because of the current administration of the ban on Muslims, of attacking the immigrants. It is going to be very difficult, even though the citizenship in question is not there, to get the people to participate. We currently serve 15,000 people annually in our office. And these are individuals coming daily. This is not even outreaching tremendously, and that's just ongoing. Our offices consist of 20,000 square feet. We have the largest food pantry, and we started, because of the city, thank you again, the first halal Meals on Wheels program. And it's not in the city, the first one, it's in the state. And it's really unfortunate because there are so many seniors, as AARP is talking about, and many of them are Muslims. They're not receiving services, they're not receiving anything, and they don't know how to get those services. So coming back, I urge you to consider how to work with the community-based organization and coalitions and the census committees that are already formulated. And for us to really get the word out, we are already working at it. And we're expecting to reach to 250 mosques, institutions, private Islamic institutions, and CBOs that are in the 5 boroughs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Linnea Cedarberg. Good evening.
Hello, my name is Linnea Cedarberg. I technically became a New York resident less than a year ago, so I don't know why I'm here spending my time volunteering with Pastor Monrose and Borough Hall and the Brooklyn Community Foundation to make sure that Brooklyn is counted. Make Brooklyn count.
100%.
So like I mentioned, I'm a volunteer working with this team to basically make sure that all of the stakeholders and partners in Brooklyn are prepared and have the priorities set ahead of them to come together and be as efficient as possible in reaching as many people in Brooklyn as possible. With that task between April and now, there's been a lot of swirl, there's been a lot of competing priorities, there's been a lot of data. You mentioned, oh, we could find this data, we could find this. Yes, there's a lot of data out there. You need people to look at it, you need people to think about it, and you need people to act on it. And so what I'd like to just mention today are just a couple of ideas of ways that the Brooklyn Complete Count Committee is looking to really focus on priorities. One of those is the segmentation by location. We have different subcommittees across types of organizations, but we want to also make sure that we're segmenting those by location to make sure that the faith-based organizations, the CBOs, the media in a particular neighborhood all know where those other partners are and can communicate with each other. Another thing that we're looking at is, and potentially looking at with the greater state of New York, is looking at unnormal or alternative types of media engagement. One thing that we didn't mention today, or the first speaker didn't mention today, was organic media, particularly for young people. It's very woke right now to be politically active. So how can we make sure that we equip people with the information for them to produce their own content? Meaning, if someone wants to post something on their Instagram story about the importance of the census, you know, depending on how many people follow them, that is a lot of coverage that we can leverage as a campaign. Finally, I want to think about considering, again, non-traditional partnerships, making sure that businesses and communities are engaged, making sure that local cafes have the opportunity to promote participation in the census by maybe offering a free coffee for people who complete their census. Thinking about non-traditional partnerships and non-traditional content is one way that we can make sure that we are reaching as many people as possible. Thank you.
One question quickly. You mentioned Instagram and people following the sort of the Instagram influencer sort of phenomenon now, which is a big important thing. Are there other vehicles like Instagram that you feel we should pursue in some sort of strategy to reach out to younger people and other communities?
So I look at a lot of people on the subway and what they're looking at. They're scrolling through Instagram stories. That's what they're looking at when they're bored, that they're trying to find engaging content. So the more people that we can provide this content to, because they want to be a part of the story, the more easy it'll be to just share it exponentially.
Great, thank you. For the record, I'm not an Instagram influencer, but Commissioner Beveridge is. Next up, Ruth Carter. Good evening.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to make one or two comments. I'm from the December 12th movement by way of the Center for Law and Social Justice. They have actively go out in the community and pull in community organizations, because as it was earlier stated, it's the community organizations that are more in touch with the people in the community. One thing that is, and I think the most important thing that would cover some of the suggestions that was made, is money, money, money. We need money to finance this campaign from here forth. I know in the Black community, we have to reach out to our neighbors, our people in our churches, our community centers, and so forth, to let them know to check Black, because since 2010, the populations of Black people have been dwindling, and one reason is because of misinformation, not being informed. I'd like to offer a suggestion. You know, we go to the poll to vote. We vote in numbers for Obama. Let's go to the poll to do the census for those who can get to the polls. The other is, someone mentioned, when we do the Meals on Wheels, that's a good opportunity also. And one other, I think, is, well, I'm sure folks have thought of going to the centers, have them make appointments for assistance at their community center for people who do that. So, because some elderly people don't like whoever knocks on the door. They don't want to open the door. So here, right in your own development, you can go downstairs or wherever the community center is and have someone assist you. So I'd like to offer those couple of suggestions in terms of getting out the vote. And also those posters and banners have to speak to the community. That's one reason in terms of community organizations need to be involved. So again, I'd say money, money, money. This campaign needs money. Going out in the streets, we need banners, we need postcards, we need everything that, you know, we can think of. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Michael Sherrill. Cheryl? Nina Robbins. Good evening.
I guess let's start the clock. So first, thank you for being here. I'm a born and bred Brooklynite. I went to school right across the street, so this is an issue that is near and dear to my heart. My name is Nina, and I'm the program director of FYI. We're a small nonprofit media group, and we work with other nonprofits, social enterprise, and government agencies to help them better communicate public service announcements and information about the wealth of civic, educational, legal, financial, and health-related resources available to New Yorkers in need. Our signature program is the Psa Network. It's an ecosystem of over 100 digital displays inside of community centers, senior centers, public health clinics, hospitals, and concert venues, and we offer those screens to other nonprofits totally free. So it's a completely free media distribution option for New York's nonprofit community. We are committed to raising awareness about the census and encouraging full participation. And to this end, we're working with local community and ethnic media, nonprofit service providers, advocacy groups, and local artists to realize this goal. We partnered with CUNY and Jehangir to provide a workshop to help facilitate ad buys in the local and ethnic community media, and we want to do a lot more. We're interested in donating our digital community media network for A/B testing of messaging, and that's a great way for everybody to realize and refine what messages work with which targeted communities. And we're also leading a project that aims to educate and engage one of the most historically undercounted populations, children. We are putting together a PSA challenge for young students from traditionally undercounted communities to create and produce their own PSA campaigns for their peers. And we aim to educate and engage young artists about the 2020 census through this program, and we're looking for schools and other nonprofits to participate in this fun, interactive project. The winning PSAs will be displayed on our community media network, and we're also talking with other media companies to access donated media and remnant space to share these messages. Not only will this encourage kids to participate, but as we all know, kids are a great and effective tool to get their parents to participate as well. So I'd love to connect with the Complete Count Commission and everybody in this room to get these projects started and also to ensure that every Brooklynite and every New Yorker is counted. So thank you.
Your website?
www.fyeye.org, like for your eyeball. So, okay.
Thank you very much. Next, Colette Peen. Wasn't sure if that was a P or a B, so I apologize.
For the record, my name is Colette Peen. I'm the Executive Director of East New York Restoration Local Development Corporation in the East New York section of Brooklyn in Community Board 5, which is one of the most undercounted in the community. We have already started under the leadership of the New York City BLAC and Mr. James Tillman, who is a longtime resident, a longtime activist, as well as his census hat. So we have had numerous meetings at our community board in the different committees. We, as East New York Restoration, had job fairs right there on site. We have provided training for our residents, and we have started to do stickers and buttons. Our goal is to get to the barbershops in our community, because the particular target we're trying to reach is young black men who are even more undercounted than in general. They also are the fathers in many instances of young children, which, as the previous speaker was saying, is another undercounted community. We see that our role as a community-based organization is to leverage our experience in going door to door, in forming partnerships, because we are used to being underfunded to do our work, but this is critically important. Having said that, it is, as one of many of the previous speakers spoken, the long-term record of community-based organizations in delivering messaging to our community can only really be effective if you, the commissioners, lean on the financial aspects of the state to release funding. The state has relied on community-based organizations to deliver HIV prevention messages very successfully. The peer-based model funded by the state has been very successful in many different instances. So I see that there is indeed a long record of return on investment. I don't know what they're talking about this time, since their own data shows that the delivery of these messages at the grassroots level, A, makes a significant and measurable change, B, is more efficient than a untargeted central message. Another aspect that I think should be duplicated that we are doing is providing or seeking our fellow CBOs, fellow merchants, fellow library stakeholders to be places where people can fill out the census, because it is a problem. So we are multiplying whatever tablets people have, creating a volunteer committee because we think people are going to need help and places to fill out the census. We are definitely committed to the complete count. We urge the commissioners, and I'm sorry Assemblywoman Walker left because she is a strong advocate, as is our Assemblyperson Charles Barron in East New York, that the money must go to the people who can actually deliver the services. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Juan Rosa?
Can I say, am I allowed to ask a question?
Yes, a question.
I just wanted, because, this came up, and I know this is something that Esmeralda Simmons is working for a long time, and I was glad to hear about what happened in Brownsville with the count. But so many times we hear about the undercount and distrust. We think of immigrant groups, language barriers, but is it true that amongst, careful about my words, but lower income African Americans in certain areas, there's also distrust in filling out a form from the government. Can you speak to that? Have you faced that challenge?
Absolutely. One of the, in fact, I can read you some data on it. In our community of East New York, which is predominantly African American, heavy number of whom are native born, we are also one of the communities that is very impacted by mass incarceration. When people are upstate, they get counted. But many people are coming back home, having had we are one of the communities with the highest stop and frisk rates. We are one of the communities where most engagement with the official state actors is not pleasant, is not supportive, where if you tell your business, you are often not helped. And that has left a lingering fact-based distrust of filling out forms. It has left us with, oh, I have 5 children, I'll tell you I have 1. We're living in a 1-bedroom and there's 10 of us in here. I am certainly not going to tell you my business because then you're going to kick me out of the apartment. So for all of those reasons, we have a built-in justified distrust, which leads to the undercount. The other thing with our community is because of gentrification, as well as in East New York, the number of new homes, literally where my office is located, we have, 10 years ago, the building did not exist. The Fountain Avenue project, state-funded project, is going to bring 20,000 new homes. They weren't there. East New York has some of the most new buildings. Those people were not there, so I don't know where so they weren't counted there. And if they do not know that they need to be counted there, based on the distrust we already have, you're going to see an invisibility even multiply more.
I appreciate it. So we're relying on, as in other communities, trusted actors, validators within those communities.
And it must be peer-based as well. I think that was one of the successes of our HIV prevention work, that people from the community were funded to do it, people who had been victims, who were living with HIV. So I think those successful models we need to implement in social campaigns.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just one more point on that. One more point, sorry, because you raised a good point on new housing developments not being there since the last census. We
Right.
had the same issues emerge in our Westchester hearing, what was it, last week or 2 weeks? I get the time confused because we're so many places.
Good.
But that's good. That's good for us.
Right.
But if there are issues like that, because right then in 2010, that community never existed.
Didn't exist.
So if there's ways for us to then help target those new communities that you know of, feed those to us so we can ensure that they're part of that process and discussion or, you know, being touched in some way as well.
One of the things we're doing is reaching out to the developers who built them.
Yeah.
As part of our just general work, so we will share that with you.
Thank you.
Because they should, and they have the money.
Thank you. Juan Rosa. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Juan Rosa. I am the Northeast Regional Director for Civic Engagement with NALEO. Yeah. NALEO, thank you. Thank you. NALEO is the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials. It is a leading nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that facilitates full Latino participation in American political process from citizenship to public service. Right now, we're engaged in a national campaign to make sure that the nation's second largest population group, which are Latinos, are accurately counted in the 2020 census. Our campaign is called Hágase Contar, which means make yourself be counted. We have census campaign managers on the ground in 5 states, including here in New York. We based our outreach on research that we did last year, which showed which messages and which messengers were most effective in getting Latinos to be counted. During that research, we discovered that letting Latinos know that the census is easy, confidential, and required is the most accurate message for Latinos. Again, that the census is easy, confidential, and required. We also discovered who were the people that were the most trusted messengers. And these include, at the very top, women who are heads of household. So family members, women who are the heads of the household, are the most trusted messengers on census. Another cohort that is a trusted messenger are people who are around schools and education, daycares, people who deal with the education of our children. Those are trusted messengers, as well as people in the medical field. Doctors, healthcare providers, visiting nurse services. Those are the top 3 messengers. For Latinos who speak Spanish, Spanish media is another trusted messenger. Right here in New York, we're working with community organizations, community partners, to just inform them of this research, inform them of our work. At the National, we have a hotline that runs from 8:30 a.m. to 8 p.m., and it helps people with information around the census. We did meet with the Department of State last week, and one of the suggestions was that at some point we link the hotline directly to the census phone response hotline. So we're exploring that internally now. But that number is 1-877-EL-CENSO, 1-877-352-3676. Again, that is open from 8:30 a.m. to 8 p.m. It is bilingual. It is Spanish and English. Thank you so much, Commissioner. So I'm running out of time, but one of the things I wanted to talk about was the undercount of children, which was referred to earlier. In the state of New York, 21,000 kids younger than 4 years old were not counted in 2010. 21,000 Latino kids were not counted in the last census. So we have a sub-campaign. My time is up, but we'll submit it for the record.
Thank you very much.
Could you give me that number again?
1-877-352-3676. 1-877-352-3676. Again, 8:30 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Juan, your organization's been really fabulous working with the commission. We've had plenty of testimony analysis, so thank you for all that you're doing. That concludes the public comment period. Thank you all. I know it takes a lot of effort to come and sit here, but this really helps inform our final deliberations and report. Thank you for taking time out tonight and participating. This is a critically important process. If we get an undercount, You've all said what the outcomes and the consequences are. So we're relying on you, and hopefully you can rely on us as we get the final report. So thank you very much for attending, and good night.